Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far. And so for today's video, I'm going to be revisiting my 2020 favorites, my top makeup of the year from 2020. This is everything I featured in that video last year. I'm kind of compiling, ready to do that video for this year. So I thought it's a perfect time to look back on my favorites from a year ago and just see how many of these am I still using? Have I changed my opinion on any of them? Have any of them been like kicked out in the past year? Have they been bumped down my favorites list? And how are they doing? Do I use any of them at all a year later? Let's find out. So there is quite a lot of products, as you can imagine. This was my entire favorites for the whole year. So there's a fair number of products, although I do try to keep that as concise as possible. So it may feel like I'm rushing through this. It may not. This video may be 3 hours long, but I'm going to try and move through as quickly as we can so that the video is not 2.5 hours long. We'll see what happens. So let's start off with mascaras. There were 2 mascaras in my 2020 favourites, and that was this one, the Charlotte Tilbury Push Up Lashes, and also Dark Star from Pat McGrath. Now, they were my 2 favourite mascaras this time last year, and they're still my 2 favourite mascaras a year later. Who would have thought that? I would not have thought that. I would not have thought, given that I love trying new mascaras, mascaras like one of my favourite products to review, one of my favourite products to use. So I do use and try a lot. So a whole year, like keeping my top 1 and 2, that is pretty big news. That's a big deal, guys. I don't have a Pat McGrath Dark Star. I have ordered one, but it was out of stock for an inordinate amount of time, a painful amount of time, some would say. Luckily, I now have my Bite Beauty mascara that I do really like, not quite as much as Dark Star, but it filled the hole, filled the void while I was waiting for that one to be restocked. I've now restocked it in the Pat McGrath sale, but of course it's not here yet because, you know, it's not been 6 weeks yet. But yes, those 2 mascaras remain a whole year later, top 1 and 2 mascaras in the collection. So well done, guys. Strong. Next, I think I'm going to start diving into this giant pile of eyeshadow palettes over here because there's quite a few, as you can imagine. First up, let's tick this one off the box. Divine Rose 2 was my favourite eyeshadow palette this time last year. Potentially, probably still is my favourite, my ultimate favourite eyeshadow palette a whole year later. Definitely, my love has not waned. I've tried a lot of eyeshadow palettes this last year, and I don't think any of them have gazumped her. There has become some new loves of my life, and she's got more competition now, for sure. The other, was it Subversive I picked up this year? The other Mothership, that one is challenging, for sure. There's definitely been some incredible Natasha Denona launches this year, some Charlotte Tilburys, but there's also been a lot of smaller palettes, quads, things like that, that this one can still, you know, it's like, I'm fine, I'm okay, you're not gonna take my place. This one is still just about hanging on. It's still glorious to look at. I still appreciate her so much. I still get a lot of joy out of using it. Now here's one that has kind of fallen by the wayside. This is Celestial Divinity. So this is last year's kind of holiday palette from Pat McGrath. At the time, I loved it. I just thought it was one of the most fun eyeshadow palettes I've ever owned to play with. I felt like it kind of gave me some colour, but it also gave me some safe spaces to be my normal boring self in. But this one, I feel like, has been completely bashed off top place in this kind of category by this year's palette. I way prefer Celestial Odyssey to Celestial Divinity. That's confusing, isn't it? The new palette from Pat McGrath, the new holiday palette, I love the packaging much more. It feels much sturdier, and the shades inside are just more me. I barely, if ever, touch this palette now. I think the sort of excitement and the enjoyment of using it faded quite quickly. I don't think this one has enough mattes, but also it doesn't have any really transition shades in here for me and my skin tone and my preferences. It's probably much more suited to someone who likes to play with colour than me. I feel like this year's palette just is much easier for me to work with and make combos. So I think that one has a longer life in my collection than that one does. So yeah, that one for me, definitely the love kind of, it was really exciting because it was different. but I'd say like it faded quite quickly. The other two palettes, the quads from that holiday collection from Pat McGrath. So we had Interstellar Icons and Risque Rose. How are we going to hold these? So Interstellar Icons, let's do this. Interstellar Icons, Risque Rose. I love both of these quads. This one wins by a mile, a country mile, and is still probably my favourite quad, I think. I do love the Venus in Fleurs. That's what I have on my balls today. Oh, eyeballs. Okay, eyeballs. Filth. This one is quite a lot more exciting than that one. This one is like, it's nice. I like the look I get out of it, but it isn't quite as complete of a quad as this one and the Venus in Fleurs. And this one is just so stunning and beautiful. It still has my heart. I still get a lot of joy out of it. This one, it's like, it's fine. You know, I don't reach for it that often. I will say that. Now these two, so this is the bronze and the glam palettes, the midi size palettes from Natasha Denona that she came out with last year, that were both big faves of mine, big loves. Definitely the glam palette was a love. Definitely the bronze palette was a like/love is what I'm going to say. Here they are. Now I do still like both of these palettes. I definitely use both of these less than I think I would have thought. In the last year, I'd say I would have thought this one in particular, Glam, would have been like all I use. But I feel like this year, a lot of palettes that just really tickle my pickle came out this year. So it had so much more competition for me to use it and reach for it and want to pick it up. And I just feel like this suits me a lot better in winter than it does in summer. I'm just starting to want to use this again. These are kind of the shades that I like to use in winter, not so much in spring and summer. So I feel like it just hasn't got much use at all, as much as I thought that it would, either of these palettes, to be honest. I just feel like there's others that excite me and just call my name a bit more than both of these. This one, I think now winter is here, that will change. But I feel like for me, it's definitely one I only really feel drawn to in the cooler months. It's definitely not kind of one I use a lot in the spring and summer for some reason. I don't know why, but it's just how I roll. Now, I ummed and ahed about whether I was going to talk about this eyeshadow palette today, just because this is not something, this is no longer just makeup to me, okay? This product is, it just doesn't feel like I want to talk about it in the same way as I'm just going to rush through all of these products and update you on my thoughts, because it's just not the same, okay? And this is Mel's palette with Sydney Grace. This is the Tiny Marvels palette that Mel created with Sydney Grace last year. I cannot tell you how much this meant to me when Mel sent it to me initially, and how much even more it means to me now. It's the single most special makeup item that I have in my entire collection. I'm finding it very hard to want to touch or use this. I love to look at it. I will keep it forever. I don't care if it hard pans or goes moldy or starts growing some kind of mildew. This is going to stay close to me forever. And I know Mel would want me to use it. I know she'd want me to keep getting in there and using it, but I do not want it to be gone. I know you can purchase this again now. Sydney Grace has re-released it, and I love that for all of you guys who really regretted not picking it up at the time. But this is the one that Mel gifted to me, and it's irreplaceable. So yeah, of course, this is like now the most special item in my entire collection, and will be for as long as my collection is going. For as long as there is blood in my veins, this is going to be close to my heart. So that's eyeshadow. Let's do a couple of palettes, face palettes. Why not move on to face palettes? So first up we have Nars's Hot Fix palette. This was one of my absolute favourite products the whole of last year. I still really enjoy this. It's just such a perfect combination of blushes, and the highlight is actually really, really pretty as well. But at the same time, I've now got so many Nars blush palettes that none of them get a lot of use. This is still, is it my favourite? Is it my favourite? The On the Beach, is that what it's called? Orgasm on the Beach, is that what it's called? I think so. I'm pretty confident. That one I think might pip this one now. I don't know, because this one's much smaller. It's got 2 less shades. The other one has more options. So I think this may have been slightly pipped by the On the Beach palette. And that one also has the pink, and this is silver, which isn't as much of a love of mine when it comes to colour. So yeah, I think this has been pipped, but I still love her. She's still very, very beautiful and gives me lots of joy. Next up, this is the Hourglass Sculpture palette. Now, this was my favourite ever palette like this from Hourglass. I felt like all the shades just complemented me really nicely, and my skin tone, it was perfect and everything worked, which is unusual for these palettes. There's usually like a product in here I won't use or I don't like, and not the case in this one. The highlight is like one of my all-time favourites. It's beautiful, but you can probably see it has not been used very much, has it? Not a lot of use out of that one. If you look at those pans, still very, very domed. So I didn't use this one that much, but there are reasons. Obviously, I kind of had a break from Hourglass last year. Very early on in the year, I kind of stopped using Hourglass, stopped reviewing their products on my channel, took a break from the brand and kept my little eye on what they were up to. And yeah, I mean, I still do use their products. I don't use them on my channel just yet, just at the moment, but yeah, for sure this is a beautiful product, but I just don't feel like I reach for it very often unless I'm traveling. And even then, now the Charlotte Tilbury Newgasm, I way prefer that palette to this one. That one was just literally made for me. So yeah, that one has definitely kind of just gone to the back of a drawer to die. So other cheek products now, there's a fair few of these, as you can imagine. Sorry about that, the sun came out and I just went very, very orange, so I just had to address that. But there were 2 bronzers that came out last year that rocked my world, that became like my ultimate favourite bronzers, and it was the Charlotte Tilbury and the Gucci. One of these, this one, I'll just spoil the surprise myself. This bronzer has remained an absolute go-to staple that I love and enjoy. I'm about to hit pan any day, any moment, as I talked about in my project pan. The Gucci, I don't know why, I've just really stopped using this. I got a lot of use out of it, really enjoyed it. Nothing's changed, it hasn't hard pan, nothing weird has happened. Other bronzers have come along. So the Victoria Beckham bronzer has come along, and that is now my #1 favourite. But, you know, the Charlotte Tilbury, I have still kept using this one, and that's the case. I think the Victoria Beckham has gazumped this one also. So I don't know why, I just don't really find myself reaching for this one as much. And I couldn't really tell you the reason, but I barely use it anymore. I need to have a word with myself, I guess. Maybe I'm just preferring the matte bronzers. Maybe that's what it is. That one, the Gucci, is the luminous one of the family. So maybe that's what it is. But I'm not finding it as too luminous or anything like that. I just don't feel myself drawn to using it. And I can't explain why. I don't know the reasons. Oh, I just found another eyeshadow palette that we didn't talk about, and it's Fire Rose from Charlotte Tilbury. Now this one, I think if anything, has grown on me. Like, I liked it, I always liked it, but then I just found the way to use it that I love it. So when I first started using it, I'd use this sort of wine, very, very rich red shade in my crease, and then I'd go in with the shimmers on my lid. Now I use this bronze shade in the crease like as a matte. It's a less over the top shimmer, so I use it in my crease all over my lid. I deepen slightly with the matte and then use the shimmers on my lid, and it went from like a 6 to a 9. I'm not sure I can give anything a 10, but it went from a 6 to a 9, and now I love it more than ever. So there's that, but it has now disappeared from all of our lives, which is very sad. Back to the cheek products. So highlights, let's talk about highlights. The Charlotte Tilbury Superstar, I think this is one that's grown on me. Is it that what it's called? Yes, it is. I think I always liked it. It came out with about 15 other highlights around the same time, some of which we'll talk about as well in a moment. But this one, yeah, I always kind of liked it, but it was very overwhelming to kind of work out which do I like the most at the time. This is one that every time I use it, I'm like, I like this more than I remember liking it. I think it's very large, therefore it sits. I have to store it away from where everything else is. So it's easy to forget that it's there and how much I like it. This is one that in summer I find a bit light for what I like. So in winter I kind of rediscover it, and I've just started using this again, and it's gorgeous. It's just the perfect amount of glow without being like glittery or shimmery or too metallic. I can buff this in and it'd be beautiful, healthy, luminous glow. And the colour of this works much better for me now I'm a bit lighter than I am in summer. So this one has definitely stood the test of time and I'm still loving it. However, this Pat McGrath, this is the Champagne Gold, the Skin Fetish. This was Pat's first highlight that she came out with, and I was very flipping excited, like everybody else, to finally get like a cheek product from Pat. This is the cheek product that started the mayhem This is the cheek product that started the mayhem that followed, with blushes and highlights galore. So at the time I liked this one. I loved it actually, and I still do, but the texture of it, the packaging, the colour has definitely been improved, I feel like, with each highlight she does. Obviously, the Divine Rose is still my favourite from the brand, but also all three of the other powder highlights that have been released since this one, I prefer over this one. So even like from Pat's brand, this has fallen down the ladder 3 steps. I prefer all 3 of her other highlights to this one. Doesn't mean that I don't like it, but it barely gets used. One, because it's a pain to unscrew it. I'm really glad she learned from the packaging of this one, because to unscrew a flippin' ginormous paperweight to do your highlight is just unnecessary and annoying, and it's too big to store very nicely as a highlight. It's ginormous. So I feel like we've learned lessons. Colour of her subsequent highlights that she's released I way prefer, way better than for me, and a way thinner. This was quite that thick formula, very strange thick texture to it, and the others definitely finer and thinner on the skin, so kind of just easier to work with, a bit more flattering. I still like this one, but 100% it's been gazumped by all of the highlights that she released after it. So kind of like the Charlotte Tilbury, the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude Glow came out that last year, and was, again, it came out along with a lot of others, and took me a long time to kind of know where I stood with them. This one has definitely, again, solidified its space. One of my absolute favourite highlights of all time, probably a top 3. Probably a top 3, I'm going to say. That's what I'm going to commit to. I'd say this is top 3 highlights for me. Certainly 5, definitely 5, maybe 3. It's gorgeous, perfect for every occasion, can be used lightly and really melts into the skin. The shade is perfect, summer and winter. This is the formula that was in her Bronze and Glow palette. Is it the, no, I can't remember the name of the flipping formula now, but what is it? Super Glow Impact Powder, the Glow Impact Powder. Yes, that's what it was, the Glow Impact formula. It's gone really dark. This is the Glow Impact formula that was in her Bronze and Tan Bronze and Glow palette and in her Love Glow palette, and I loved this formula, and I was so excited when she brought it out in a single, and it has not disappointed. I'd say, again, it's one that's kind of grown on me over time. At first I knew I liked it. Over time it's become a love and a staple for me, and it sits in my top drawer, and I'm sure will remain there. Next up, the Guerlain Terracotta. This is the Terracotta Nude Highlight. This is one that has definitely lost its throne a little in my collection. I was trying to think of what I wanted to say about each of these products before, when I was going through my drawer and finding everything. This was one that I was like, I feel sad that it has kind of lost its shine in my collection. It's definitely been downgraded. It's gone from top drawer to second drawer down. Brutal, aren't I? There's not to say that it's not a beautiful highlighter and I don't love it. I think what's happened here is this was the first highlighter I found that was like, it's not giving me that metallic beaming seen from space or very harsh on texture that all of the highlighters I'd kind of tried before this one did. When I found this, not only did it give me the smoothest, subtlest glow, but it also was skin tone wise was just perfect. It didn't leave a cast. It was perfect for me for what I look for in a highlight, but also in the shade. And I think just what's happened, hear me out, since this is a lot of highlights have come along that give me the smooth melt into the skin formula and a colour that works really well with my skin tone, that doesn't leave a cast, that isn't too light or too deep, that doesn't emphasize texture, but they just give me a bit more glow than this one gives me. This barely gives you any glow at all. You could almost put this over your whole face, probably don't, but you could, because it's very, very, very subtle. But then I found like the Charlotte Tilbury, the Natasha Denona, now I have the Hermes that does that as well, and the other Pat McGrath highlights that I own. And they give me a bit more glow than this one, but they do all of the positive things that this one does. So this is a kind of blended swatch of the Natasha Denona, which is how I would use it. And you can just see the difference probably in the shine there. Way more shine than the Guerlain, which is, again, there's a place for Guerlain in lots of people's collection, but I've definitely gone a bit more glowy, still very smooth, still not glittery or shimmery, still very glowy, melt into the skin kind of glow, but a bit more than this is what I'm liking these days. So I'm sorry, but that one has definitely kind of slipped down a notch or two. And next up we have this Chantecaille duo. This is the Blush and Glow duo. So there's a highlight and a blush. One issue with this is that's one reason it doesn't get as much use, because it's the highlight now has fallen out, the glue has just failed miserably. But what I will say is I don't use this as much as I thought, and I think the reason is when I first got this, I loved it. The blush was one of my favourites, and so was the highlight. But now I have blushes I prefer and I have highlights I prefer. So I just don't typically reach for it. I still think it's beautiful. I think if you have a much smaller collection than me, you're probably using this to death. But I think with me, it's got a lot of competition, and therefore I just kind of forget about it. It sits again in my second drawer, not my top drawer, and I just don't use it as much, but a lot of that is probably because it's broken. So packaging is important. Next up, the Chanel Chains blush. This is that stunning pattern. It's so beautiful. This is another one that I just don't use as much as I perhaps thought that I would, even though when I look at it, I think it's gorgeous. And I don't know why I wouldn't be using it that much. I think maybe the colour is just not, it's more of that copper, and it is very, very glowy. Another blush I'm going to talk about in a moment that is quite similar to this one, I just prefer. And I also prefer the Charlotte Tilbury Walk of No Shame that I discovered this year. And yeah, I need to use this more. This is this video talking about and looking at these things. Some of these things I'm like, I need to pull that out. And this is one of those products where I'm like, I need to pull that out. Why am I not using that? I'm going to put this on my desk and I'm going to use it tomorrow. That's my promise to you. So the other blush that kind of sits in this family is Hourglass at Night. This was my absolute favourite blush for a long time. We're running out of space. It's much lighter than the Chanel, but in the similar colour family. This is very similar to the Charlotte Tilbury Walk of No Shame, and this was one I used a lot on my channel before me and Hourglass had our little falling out. So I think that's again why I'm not using this. I kind of replaced this one with the Charlotte Tilbury. I'm more comfortable using that on my channel and therefore more comfortable wearing it and using it. So it is a shame because I really love that blush and it's just got such a beautiful finish, but I just don't want to represent brands on my channel that I don't feel their values align with mine or they represent me. And as I always say to you guys, I know some of you feel like I should review Hourglass or I should keep using them, or maybe you feel like there are other brands I shouldn't use. And all I can say is, obviously, there's so many opinions and it's so difficult, and everyone has a different way of looking at things and a different opinion and different what is and isn't acceptable to them. And this is mine, and that's all I can give you. I know lots of people wish that I reviewed Hourglass or that I used their products, and lots of people are really glad that I don't. So I can only really do what I think and what is best for me, and what I look at brands and make my decisions. And it's not easy. It's not an easy decision to make, but I can only do my best. I am but a human lady. So a concealer that made it into my favourites last year, along with the powder, is obviously the Pat McGrath concealer and powder. And again, these two products have made it a whole year in top spot, in holy grail position in their respective categories. So not a lot more to say. Of course, you guys knew that. Of course, you know that's my #1 concealer and my #1 powder. That's all she wrote. That's all there is to say on that. Oh, I missed a blush. Nars Orgasm X. She's pretty, isn't she? She's pretty. Look at that. Another one that has 100% fallen off of my radar, and it's only for my own regret and my own mistake that I do that. And I think it's because when I open it and look at it, it's intimidating. But as you can see, blended in the summer, a moment's silence. It's gorgeous. Still lives in my top drawer. Still love it. Still think it's beautiful. Still one of my absolute favourites. And again, need to put it on my counter so that I will use her this week, because it's overwhelming sometimes. I sometimes think I wish I could just get rid of like 90% of my makeup so that I can remember and see all the products that I really, really, really love, but then my channel would die. So it's not really an option. So let's talk about foundations. There were 5 foundations I spoke about quickly. The YSL Latent Creme. This was that weird foundation that kind of was released for 1 week and we never heard or saw of it again. So I don't tend to use this, because although I liked it, it was a nice, decent foundation, it's definitely not one of my ultimate favourites, and it's very confusing and it's not helpful to talk about it because no one can buy it, and apparently no one could buy it at the time. It was very, very strange. Next we have the Chanel Le Beige. This is the, what is it? Healthy Glow Foundation, Hydration and Longwear. I like this foundation. I'm not obsessed with it. I don't love it. It does actually sit in my top foundation drawer. It's probably like 10th, I'd say, if I was to rank them. So it doesn't get a lot of use. I do like it, but I don't adore and love it. It doesn't wear as well as a lot of the other foundations on me unless I set it. If I'm filming, I will happily wear this because I think it looks glorious, very beautiful on the skin. But it fades and it gets a bit too shiny much quicker than like the others that I love. So it's still it's still pretty much where it was, although other foundations have come out this year. So it's probably gone from like being my 6th favourite to like 10th. So yeah, it's not long for this world. We'll very quickly pass over this one. This has spent over a year now in absolute top place on my foundations list, so it has 100% stood the test of time, and that is very impressive for a foundation with the number that I try, the number that come out, to have stayed holy grail unchallenged bar none for over a year is like, whew, welcome to the Hall of Fame. 2 that slightly fell off this year, the Estee Lauder Futurist Hydra Rescue. This one has this is pretty slim pickings left in here. I like this one. Estee Lauder's shades are decent for me, which makes a difference. This one is beautiful. If I set it, I like it more because otherwise it looks a little funky on the forehead. It doesn't love my forehead lines as much as some of these other foundations. A couple more came out this year. It got bumped down out of my top 5, but I still think it's beautiful. It's nice and thin of a consistency. The finish is gorgeous. It's just not quite giving what I want it to give and that some of these others give. That smoothing, perfected look all day. This one just kind of lets the ball drop on my forehead. Oh no. And the Tom Ford Soft Matte, still probably my favourite matte foundation. But the foundation I have on today, this is the Lisa Eldridge foundation, the new foundation from Lisa Eldridge, has taken top spot when it comes to what am I wearing out to dinner? What am I wearing for drinks with the girls? What am I wearing when I don't want to be super glowy? It used to be this, and now it's the Lisa Eldridge. I think they're very neck and neck, but I think the colours in the Lisa Eldridge are just a lot easier for me. The undertones are a lot easier, and yeah, I think it just has an extra bit of life to it. So still a love, but has been kind of, if I'm going on date night, it's the Lisa when it used to be the Tom. And finally, lip products. So starting off with the YSL Slim Glow Mattes, one of my favourite formulas at the end of last year, definitely have fallen down the list. I thought these were going to be like, I was going to have 20 of them by now, but I haven't actually purchased any more. They do get a bit forgotten in my drawer. I think this year was just the year of Lisa Eldridge, the year of Charlotte Tilbury and Pat McGrath Lips for me, and Fenty smashing it with some new formulas. So I think these just kind of fell a bit by the wayside, even though I still like them. They just don't get picked as much as I thought they might. Speaking of Lisa Eldridge, Velvet Affair was on my top favourites from 2020, and I mean, she's got a lot of use, even though I daren't use these that much because they do go out of stock. I mean, that is really grubby, but this is one of my all-time favourite nudes. I still absolutely adore it. I think it just suits me so well, this colour. I know for lots of people this is a bit dark, but the issue for me with a lot of lipsticks or nudes is that they're too light. So for me, this is perfect. When you have sort of more of a medium skin tone, a lot of the nudes that brands come out with are too light and you need a liner. This is one of the very few nude lipsticks, especially mattes, that I can use as an everyday shade and is actually flattering and doesn't wash me out or doesn't give me foundation lips, and I'm obsessed. And then the glosses, I don't know if it was her summer collection or her winter collection last year where she launched her glosses, I can't remember, but again, these are my favourite glosses. Obsessed with them. I now own a lot more shades than I did this time last year, and I have no regrets. They are incredible. Just the perfect gloss, non-sticky, perfect amount of pigmentation. Don't have that like residue that some glosses can leave. Are hydrating and feel so just smooth on the lips. Absolutely nothing has changed there. If anything, my love has grown just for that brand in general, but it's for the products and the lady herself. And last, but by no means least, the Fenty Slip Shines. So again, just such a clever little lip formula from Fenty. I feel like Fenty does lip products very, very well. This shade in particular, Cookies and Cocoa, this just lives in my handbag. It's like my perfect, easygoing everyday formula. You know how much I love these kind of balmy lippies, these shiny, balmy lipsticks is what I'm saying. And this is like, these are one of, if not the top spot as far as in that category. I think they're great. I still can't believe that it's like all this time later and there's no more shades of these. I would love that to have happened, but it didn't. But I still love them, and I would repurchase them if I ran out, which is quite a rarity in these parts. Oh, we did it. Okay, we did it. We got through. That is all my 2020 favourites. I'm very excited to get going on my 2021 favourites. What I'm considering for this year is to make it even less long and agonizing to do. I'm going to do, or for you anyway, not for me, it's going to be much more agonizing for me, but I'm considering doing a top 20 for this year. Instead of just telling you everything I loved, I'm going to tell you the 20 top products for the year. What do you think about that? Is that a good idea? I think it's a pretty good idea myself. Keep it simple, keep it concise, keep it the best of the best of the best. That's how I like to roll. Let me know what you think, whether I should just tell you everything I've loved or to really cut it down to the absolute creme de la creme top 20. What do you want to see? I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'd love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye 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 bye.